So you want to get a military Humvee, huh? Well, this video is for all you people like me who jokingly talked about buying a military Humvee from that surplus government website, and all of a sudden the joke went way too freaking far. Now, sometimes you just gotta walk before you run, or else you'll never run at all. I don't know, I'm not a poet, but you just gotta send it sometimes. I totally respect that, but this video is to tell you some of the things that maybe you might want to consider before just pulling the trigger and explaining the whole thing to your wife when you accidentally are the highest bidder. Speaking of being the highest bidder, let's just start with the whole buying process. Now, you can buy these things on Facebook Marketplace or eBay, or there's so many of them now. So many people have bought them that they're kind of available secondhand. Well, secondhand, they're all secondhand, but you can kind of get them from private sellers is what I'm trying to say. If you're like me, you want to do it the original way, you go to govplanet.com, you place a bid, and you hope to get one cheap. Buying one of these things, you might as well be buying an M1 Abrams tank. The government is so concerned about what you're going to do with it, why you're buying it, who you are. If you happen to be a small organization in the Middle East, let's say, that's grown exponentially since the last presidential election, even though they just let them take these things and planes and all kinds of stuff for free. I'm getting off topic. So there's a few things you got to do. I've made videos on this. You're welcome to check out my channel and watch them. It's not the most difficult thing in the world, but it is a lot of waiting, and it can be a little intimidating to someone who's never done it before. Now, once your Humvee actually arrives at your house, unfortunately, the battle is still not over. You have to go and make the thing street legal, assuming that's what you're aiming to do. Now, there's really two ways to do this. I've done both of these ways. The first way is to go through your own state and figure out the process for yourself. In my state of Missouri, it wasn't too difficult, but it was very time consuming and very frustrating. The second way you can do this whole thing is you just go to my friends at dirtlegal.com. They agreed to sponsor one of my videos. They are awesome. They explain the entire process for you, but basically you just fill out a form and do a few things that they ask you to do, and then 2 weeks later you get your title and plates in the mail. There's a small cost associated. That being said, do whatever you think is best. Now that we've gone through all that mumbo jumbo, let's talk about the Humvee itself. So the first thing I should mention is these things use 24-volt systems. Now, there's a whole lot of confusion and opinions on this. I'll save you a lot of time and research. Basically, you're going to run into one or two things. If you buy a really old truck, which is usually an M998, you are going to have a lot of trouble trying to get anything to run 12 volt unless you use a step-down converter. You can research step-down converters. I would buy a good quality unit, and then you can pretty much run all the 12 volt things you like. Now, if you have a newer truck, most of them for sale are known as M1123s. They have a dual voltage alternator. Now, what that means is you can run 12 volt accessories in the Humvee, and it will recharge the battery that is 12 volt, which is, I believe, the rear battery, if I'm remembering that correctly. And you shouldn't have any issue running 12 volt accessories off that battery. All right, enough about electronics. You don't buy a Humvee for the electronics, let's be honest. So now that you've got your not so shiny new toy, let's talk about customization. It's very expensive, and there's not a lot of aftermarket support. There are certain companies that really have done their best to fill that niche, but you're going to pay a lot of money for anything that they make. They know that they are some of the few players in the industry, and their prices definitely reflect that. Now, if you don't mind spending the big bucks, if you don't mind spending the big bucks, be my guest and shell out your hard-earned greenbacks and buy your custom rock sliders and light bars and tops and whatever you want. Also, in my experience, sometimes even when you do spend the big bucks, gosh, I don't know why I'm struggling. The parts you get are not exactly big buck quality, I'll just say. So I'm not going to name names. I've worked with just about everybody in one way or another. Just go on Google. Most of the stuff is out there. Forums, people post. They usually tell pretty much the full story of who you should work with and who you shouldn't. Now, when it comes to good old military surplus parts, unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of trouble with that as well. A lot of these same companies that sell the aftermarket parts also sell these military surplus parts. And what used to be somewhat of a free organic kind of market situation where individuals like you and me would just buy these parts and bolt them to the Humvee and they costed nothing because they were military surplus, has changed into more of a monopoly type situation where these big resellers use their buying power to buy thousands of the same part, take them off the market, and then sell them for quite literally sometimes 100x of what they bought them for. Now, don't get it totally twisted. There's some stuff on the Humvee that's totally civilian. You know, the engine is just an old 6.5 Detroit diesel. You can still buy plenty of parts for that. You know, the drivetrain is just a 4L80E. So not everything is unique to a Humvee. But if it is unique to a Humvee, just prepare your wallet and probably something else. Now, this is a big, awesome military vehicle. You might be under the impression that it's powerful and fast and fun to drive. Yeah, about that. These things are probably the slowest vehicles you will ever drive in your life. Now, there's some things you can do to the 6.5 motors to kind of make them a little bit faster, but you're going to be spending a lot of money and you're going to be getting kind of diminishing returns. Do not expect these trucks to be fast because that's just not part of the Humvee equation. Now, if it's super slow, it must be comfortable, right? No, that is absolutely wrong. You know, the ride quality of these trucks, once you get some good tires on them, isn't bad. They are very loud. It's not the tires that's loud. It's not the wind noise. It's not even the exhaust noise. It is the motor, which sounds like it's absolutely screaming at anything above 55 miles an hour. So now you're probably thinking to yourself, it's not fast and it's not comfortable. So that means it must be really good off-road. Well, kind of. On paper, the Humvee actually is really great off-road. It can do some impressive, vertical hill climbs without tipping over. It's got amazing ground clearance. In fact, I'll show you real quick. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous. It's also got massive 37-inch tires. It's got very impressive breakover and departure angles. And it's obviously very wide, which keeps them from tipping over, or rolling, I should say, either left or right. Unfortunately, the Humvee isn't the king of the hill you might think it is. Basically, I've owned two types of off-road rigs. The first is Humvees, and the second one is Jeeps like that. Well, that one's actually my wife's. The thing is, if you live in the Midwest like me, or the East Coast, or really anywhere where there's a lot of green stuff and a lot of trees, the width really becomes a problem. These days, side-by-sides, whether you like it or not, are taking over the off-road parks, the trails, pretty much everything having to do with off-roading, especially here in the Midwest. Therefore, trails are basically almost 100% geared for these side-by-sides. Now, a Jeep isn't much wider than the average side-by-side, and you can enjoy most of those trails. Unfortunately, a Humvee is like twice the width of the average side-by-side. I know that's probably a slight exaggeration, but when you're out there trying to thread the needle, it sure feels like that. And there's going to be situations where you just have to turn around and go the other way because you can't fit between two trees or, whatever it might be. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad at off-roading, but it also kind of means it's bad at off-roading in some respects. Another area the Humvee struggles a bit with is what you see there. That is all-wheel independent suspension. Now, it's great for clearing tree stumps and going through mud and anything where you want big objects to go under the Humvee. However, when you're on massive off-camber ledges and doing rock crawly stuff, the all-wheel independent suspension definitely leads to some interesting situations. For instance, if you want your friend or your wife or whoever's with you to be able to walk under one of your tires because it's so high off the ground because the vehicle has no flex, the Humvee is definitely your vehicle. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it bad, but in the off-roading community, the general consensus is having 4 tires on the ground is going to give you a little more traction than having 3 tires on the ground. Well, there's some other things to consider as well. There's no key switch on a Humvee. There's just a switch. And that's this one right here. And anyone can walk up to a Humvee and just start it. And the doors and stuff, you know, unless you want to spend a lot of money on a hard top and custom doors with locks and everything, you're probably not going to be keeping people from the inside of your Humvee, let alone from starting it and just driving off. Now, they do make key starts that you can install. I've heard mixed things about these. Some people say they destroy your $800 start box. I don't know whether or not that's true. Apart from the theft potential issues that may occur when you own one, they're not the safest vehicles in the world. If you're interested in reading some shocking things, you might want to look up Humvee accident statistics. And last but not least, let's talk about maintenance. Don't get a Humvee expecting it to be indestructible and the ultimate zombie apocalypse of vehicle, because that's just not what they are. You know, most vehicles go for long periods of time of working great, and then they have a problem here and there that you need to correct. Humvees, on the other hand, go for long periods of time of having problems that you need to correct here and there, and they have very small periods of time where everything works. If it's not a leaky seal on one of the 2-piece wheels, it's a fuel gauge. If it's not a fuel gauge, it's a light of some sort. If it's not a light of some sort, it's a lift pump. If it's not a lift pump, it's glow plugs that have decided to randomly just self-destruct. If it's not a glow plug, it's probably a start box, which maybe caused the glow plug thing. I could go on and on and on. Stuff leaks, stuff breaks. It's just part of owning a Humvee. Generally, from my experience, they'll always get you home most of the time. Now, all that being said, they are some of the most awesome vehicles you can buy. They are so fun. The cool factor is off the charts. And it's just, you love them, even though they're broken. As far as the daily driver goes, I wouldn't do it any other way. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. Hope you liked the video. Let me know your Humvee experience and why you love your Humvee as well. And please don't forget to like and subscribe.